as much as America is divided, we're not talking about 74 million people, are we, that will never listen to Joe Biden as president?
No, we're not, no. Those 74 million people vary hugely. What Joe Biden has to do is take the sting of partisanship out of the presidency. I mean, there's no doubt that Donald Trump was a very partisan president. So was Barack Obama before him. So you've had two extremely partisan presidents in a row. And I think we'll see. I mean, Joe Biden's CV suggests that he can bring the two sides together, but we'll just have to see. I mean, he's signed a whole series of executive orders on his first day in the White House. The first of those, one of those orders was to stop the building of the wall with Mexico. He's going to be confronted with these caravans of people moving up from Central America to the United States border. And we'll see how he handles that. That's going to be one of his really big issues early on. So how does he unite the country when dealing with issues like that? Well, we'll just have to wait and see. The other thing is the impeachment of President Trump. I mean, I think if he wants to bring the country together, he should just stop that impeachment and get Nancy Pelosi, who's a very partisan player, and Chuck Schumer, her counterpart in the Senate, to bring this to an end and just move on. I mean, he's talking of moving on. I mean, Joe Biden is talking of moving on. So, I mean, I think they should abandon the impeachment process and move on and try to win over some of those 74 million people.
He's perhaps not abandoning it, but we already heard today from his spokesperson, timing's up to the House. Seemingly he wants to stay at arm's length from this. Is that the next best thing if he wants to move on? He's not going to involve himself overly in this or try to prosecute the Trump era or legacy, but move on while that happens almost beside him?
I've got bad news for him. He's now the president. He now is the leader of the nation. And so what he says carries huge weight. Saying nothing is just allowing others to take control or maintain control of the process. He would be best off to tell them, look, we didn't like President Trump. He did a terrible thing at the very end of his presidency, in the last fortnight of his presidency. But as a nation, remember, 74 million people voted for him, so we should just move on as best we possibly can. And let's not go through the drama of a trial in the Senate. I mean, honestly, a trial in the Senate will be hugely divisive, and that's not a good start for a president. I mean, I think the president isn't part of the trial, but a hugely divisive trial is not of the former president is not a good way to start a new presidency.
How do you see the Joe Biden presidency for Australia? We were just showing some vision of him. He knows Australia. He visited here during his time as Vice President. He knows what Australian rules football is, of course. He's held a Sharon, which you can't say for every US president. What do you think it will mean for Australia?
Barack Obama held a Sharon because I can remember Julia Gillard gave him one. And I gave Condi Rice and Adelaide Crowe's Guernsey. So, you know, I think Joe Biden will be good for Australia. He thinks very highly of Australia. I think, you know, his foreign policy team is very transatlantic and Middle East oriented. But you've got buried in there people like Kurt Campbell as the head of the Indo-Pacific in the National Security Council, who will be very good. I think Biden will work closely with allies, and he recognises that the United States has no better ally than Australia. So I think he'll be fine.
Jake Sullivan's comments indicate certainly the administration is very conscious of what Australia has been doing in terms of pushing back against China. Now, there's a huge debate in Australia, obviously, whether or not perhaps we shouldn't have been first to go in a rhetoric sense on the WHO or the Wuhan inquiry. But putting that aside, what do you think that says that on the China approach in particular for the Biden administration?
Well, I know Jake Sullivan, and I've served on a board with him until very recently, where he obviously has to leave. And he understands the great challenge the United States faces in dealing with China, and how to deal with China is going to be the central foreign policy issue for the new administration. So, I mean, my recommendation would be that the Australian Foreign Minister and Defence Minister put together a sort of 5 or 10 point series of proposals to the Biden administration, including to Jake and to the new Secretary of State and others, and make the point that the United States needs to ensure there continues to be a balance of power in East Asia. There should be a rules-based system in East Asia or in the Indo-Pacific region more generally. Everyone should understand the rules. And beyond that, the United States should be heavily engaged in the region with its allies, because it's not going to achieve a balance of power in East Asia or in the Indo-Pacific region without the strength of the allies, and Australia and Japan are the two most important allies in the region. So I think if we put some specific proposals to the new administration as an Australian government, that will send a very powerful message, and they will listen to us. They will listen to what the Australian government has to say. So we can influence the Biden administration's agenda, and we should try to.
Well, if you look at a lot of commentary on the relationship, often it's spoken that we have been alongside the Americans for every major conflict since, the Second World War, First World War, perhaps you'd call it that, depending on how you sort of define America.
Since 1918. Since 1918,
well, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's spoken about a lot. But in recent times, perhaps of even more significance are things such as our attitude to Huawei and 5G. I mean, we were world leading there, arguably, and prepared to, again, I know this is a topic of debate in Australia. Are we copying too much from China as a result? Was it a wise decision? But that surely would be recognised in the Biden administration if they're looking at that calculus.
Well, I mean, look, ultimately they're going to look after the United States' best interests, and their best interests are, amongst other things, in a stable Indo-Pacific region, and they know to keep that region stable, they need allies, and they need dependable allies, and they couldn't have two more dependable allies than Japan and Australia in the Indo-Pacific region. So they need to work with them. The Biden administration needs to listen to Japan and Australia, listen to what we have to say. And yes, I mean, we haven't done the things we've done in relation to Huawei and beyond because the Americans have wanted us to do those things. We've done it on the basis of our own, particularly intelligence assessments, and you know, who are any of us to argue with the intelligence community because we don't see their product.
Just finally, Scott Morrison's pivot, if you like, he was able to have some sort of rapport with Donald Trump. If Joe Biden were to mention casually on a phone call maybe, hey, Scott, I saw you at this Ohio rally, what's the deal there? How would Scott Morrison respond, do you think?
That we work with whoever the President of the United States is. This is preposterous. That we should be, as Australians, and our Prime Minister should be involved in party politics in the United States. When the President is a Republican, we work with that Republican President. When the administration changes and they become Democrats, we work with the Democrats. I was the Foreign Minister through the Clinton administration, and we worked very closely with them, and I with Bill Clinton and Madeleine Albright and others. And then the administration changed to the George W. Bush Republican administration, and we worked with them. I mean, of course the Australian Prime Minister works with the President of the United States. It would be absurd if Scott Morrison hadn't been working with Donald Trump. This argument is just base partisanship here in Australia, suggesting that he shouldn't have worked with Donald Trump. I mean, it would have been madness to do that, and it would not have been in Australia's national interest. But now our national interest will be served by working with Trump's successor.
Alexander Downer, appreciate your time today. Thank you.
It's a pleasure.